Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Anne-Marie Morell, Editor-in-Chief and CEO of Politichicks.com, and also the co-author of the new book, What Women Really Want, which I wrote with my co-anchors, Dr. Gina Loudon and Morgan Brittany. And tonight, I'm honored to take the place of Dr. Jamie Glazov. I don't know where he is. I have a high suspicion that he is a spy for Canada. I'm not positive, but I'm looking into that. But tonight, I am so excited to take his place and get to interview two of my favorite people in the whole world. They're two people that I respect pretty much at the very pinnacle of respect in my life. Robert Spencer and Daniel Greenfield. And part one is Robert Spencer. He is jihadwatch.org. That is a David Horowitz Freedom Center website. He's the author of New York Times bestsellers, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam and the Crusades, The Truth About Muhammad, and his most recent book, Arab Winter Comes to America, The Truth About the War We're In, and maybe just as important, Robert Spencer. You recently made, once again for the second year in a row, Politichicks' second annual Hottest Conservatives in the World list for new media. So congratulations.
I didn't know that.
You did, yeah. It just came out Monday.
Amazing.
Yes, it's not amazing.
I think the vote was rigged.
I've seen your legs, Robert. See, you told me not to say that, and there it just flew right out of my mouth,
Yes,
right?
See, no, we have to make clear that this is entirely fictional.
Of course, of course. But you do have good legs. All right, in all seriousness, and I am serious.
Oh dear, yes.
In your book, we're switching gears here abruptly.
Oh, yes.
In your book, America Winter Comes to America, you wrote, the willful ignorance at the highest levels has endangered Americans more than once, making for murderous attacks that could have and should have been prevented. The most notorious of these are the Boston Marathon bombing and the Fort Hood massacre. Robert, how could these have been prevented? And since no one's allowed to call these Islamic terrorist attacks, how do we make sure that they never happen again?
Well, the problem is the massive willful ignorance and denial, just like in the section that you quoted, is what's preventing the realistic approach to these attacks. The thing is that in the book I'd show how the Boston Marathon bombing, for example, could have been prevented, should have been prevented, would have been prevented if we had been realistic about the threat. The Fort Hood jihad massacre, same thing. Should have been prevented, could have been prevented, would have been prevented, were it not for the politically correct straitjacket that covers everything and makes it impossible to deal with this threat realistically. Major Hassan, the Fort Hood shooter, his superiors knew that he was a jihadi. They knew he was in touch with Anwar al-Awlaki. They knew what he thought about jihad. They knew what he thought about the American military. And yet they did not discipline him. They did not remove him. As a matter of fact, they kept promoting him and praising him because they knew that they could not move against a Muslim officer in the U.S. military without being accused of Islamophobia and bigotry and racism. It's the same thing in Britain with this horrible scandal of these rape gangs who have victimized and brutalized thousands of British girls. And authorities knew about it, and they did nothing because they were afraid, here again, of being accused of racism. This idea that it is somehow hateful and bigoted to move against jihad terror and Islamic supremacism has been spread very skillfully by groups like the Hamas-linked Council on American Islamic Relations and others for years. And they have put it over on the American people and on the West in general to the degree that people are afraid to speak out against this. People are afraid to stand against this. People think if we do speak out against this, we have to assure people this has nothing to do with Islam, and these people are twisting and hijacking the true peaceful teachings of the religion of peace. All this is complete nonsense, and it hamstrings our ability to deal with these issues. The fact is that these attempts to brand all resistance to jihad terror as racism and bigotry is a transparent attempt to stigmatize all resistance to jihad terror so that everyone is afraid to speak out and the jihad can advance unimpeded and unopposed.
Well, in a recent Front Page magazine article, you wrote about the FBI's denial of Islam terrorists, and they're focusing instead on anti-government militias, white supremacist groups, and probably people like you and Pamela Geller. What more is it going to take? I mean, with Fort Hood and with the Boston Marathon, they both basically yelled out Allah Akbar before they killed all these people. They're not trying to hide it themselves. Why is our government trying to hide it from the people? And I want to tell you another thing. This week on Facebook, one of my friends, he's a lefty, he doesn't like when I write bad things about Obama. He said that for the last 6 years, there have been no attacks on America, and that Obama has kept us safe. I had to school him a little bit. I sent him a couple of your links from Jihad Watch. But the media has been so successful in hiding this from people, in misleading, misdirecting. Why is that?
As far as Barack Obama goes and the government, I think that they have been committed since the 1960s to policies of immigration that have enabled massive Muslim populations to come into the country, particularly the last few years, with immigration and refugee resettlement programs that have brought whole communities from Iraq, from Somalia, and elsewhere in and taken them en masse from those countries and dropped them into American cities and towns. And the United States is committed, as a matter of policy, to programs like this, and committed to their success. Now, I think that is really the subtext behind Barack Obama saying the Islamic State has nothing to do with Islam, and the mainstream media, of course, anything that Barack Obama says, they will echo because they want to make him look good. And the thing is that if he says anything to the contrary, if he suggests that there could be some Islamic derivation to what the Islamic State does, if he suggests that Islamic terrorism might have something to do with Islam, then he's going to have Americans saying, well, then why are you importing these huge communities and dropping them into American towns and cities without any vetting, without any care taken as to who you're exactly bringing in? Why are you pursuing these policies that could endanger the lives of thousands upon thousands of Americans? And so he has to reassure the American people, kind of indirectly, tacitly, that the Muslims that he's bringing into the United States and who are already here are never going to behave the way the Islamic State does, and that we don't have to worry about it. And above all, we should not oppose his immigration and refugee policies. This is, of course, absurd because there is no attempt made to determine if these people are jihadis. There is no reliable way to distinguish Muslims who will never be peaceful from Muslims who will go jihad. And so it's ultimately going to backfire. It's ultimately going to cause trouble, and it's just a matter of time. And Barack Obama ultimately is going to be judged very harshly by history for how much he has endangered Americans and ultimately caused the deaths of Americans by virtue of policies that he has actively promoted and by virtue of the half-truths, distortions, and outright lies that he has foisted upon the American people, particularly in regard to the nature and magnitude of the jihad threat.
Well, here's a hard question. Why is he doing this? Why are they allowing this to happen? And why are they allowing us to potentially be set up for more attacks? Why?
You know, that's the eternal question, and I tell you, Anne-Marie, I didn't want to believe it, and for a long time I've resisted it, but I think that Barack Obama really does want to weaken the United States. Now, that might sound crazy.
But why?
Well, he's a socialist, and ultimately socialists believe in their understanding of equality. And you remember in 2008 that he was photographed coming off an airplane carrying a book that he was reading, and he was so engrossed in the book, he had his finger in the pages at his place, so he wouldn't lose his place. He clearly was reading the book all the way on his first plane trip and was carrying it to the next plane so he could continue reading. And the book was The Post-American World by Fareed Zakaria. Now, The Post-American World is about how, wouldn't it be great if there were no superpowers, and America was not a superpower, and was not politically, militarily, economically superior to any other country. Now, in order to achieve this wonderful vision of socialist equality, there would have to be a massive weakening of the United States, militarily, economically, and politically. And that is actively touted as a virtue in this book. Now, Pamela Geller and I saw this right away, particularly Pamela, in the research she was doing on Obama during the '08 campaign that led to the book that we co-wrote, The Post-American Presidency, which took its title directly from Fareed Zakaria's book that Obama was reading, The Post-American World. And The Post-American Presidency was written very early in his administration, but showed that he was actively pursuing policies that would weaken the United States. And I think that it's abundantly clear now that that is something that he's been consistent about and will be the obvious result of pretty much everything he's done. And so I do think that this is how he envisions the world, that the United States is the problem, and if the United States is weak and just like any other country, then there will be no more of these kinds of problems.
You also recently wrote about Eric Holder, who has unveiled his plan to counter violent extremism, but you wrote that he didn't say anything about Islam when he wrote this. So who are they? Who are the violent extremists they're going after?
Well, obviously it's us.
You.
Here we are. You and me and Jamie and the people at the Horowitz Center and the people at Politichicks and everybody else that we work with and associate with. You remember that one of the first things that happened during the Obama administration was that Janet Napolitano, as the head of the Department of Homeland Security, issued a report about right-wing extremists and the terror threat that would come from groups like returning veterans and constitutional activists and so on. I mean, there are neo-fascists and neo-Nazis and white supremacists out there, but Obama was lumping in this report ordinary Americans who are concerned about the direction this country is taking and want to defend constitutional values and principles of human rights that his policies have endangered. And he's lumping them in with neo-Nazis as if they're an equal terror threat. And so I think that when Holder says we're going to counter violent extremism and work with communities to fight against it, I hope he means work with Muslim groups to try to stop jihad terror. I hope so, but I wouldn't be in the least surprised if what he really zeroes in on are people who are opposed to jihad terror as being purveyors of what he would call Islamophobia. And after all, his Justice Department is actively working to stop communities. I mean, there's a town in Minnesota recently turned down a mosque building request because it violated the zoning laws of the area. And the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Hamas-linked Muslim Brotherhood Front group, got involved, and the Justice Department swooped in and is now suing the town to force them to let them build the mosque there. Now, any church would respect zoning requirements, and churches are turned down all the time for if they're wanting to build in a place that's against the zoning laws. But this is just one example of the way in which the Holder Obama Justice Department has indefatigably pursued special privileges and special accommodation for Muslims. And apparently they think that this will result in a massive outpouring of mutual goodwill on the part of the Muslims, when actually it will only arouse their contempt and bring about more assertions of superiority and more violence and so on.
Wow. Let's talk about the Islamic State, ISIS, ISIL, whatever you want to call it. What's the difference between them and the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood and any other terrorist group? And are the Syrian rebels, the ones that Obama wants to give the blank check of $500 million to, are they the next ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Taliban? Should we trust those guys?
In the first place, as far as the Hamas and Hezbollah and the Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State and Boko Haram and all the rest of them, they all have the same understanding of Islam. They all have the same goals. They all have the same worldview. The thing that sets the Islamic State apart is that it has done what all the others have wanted to do but never quite pulled off for whatever reason, and that is it's reestablished the caliphate. and actually laid claim to and been able to sustain sovereignty over a significant piece of territory in Iraq and Syria to drive home their claim and to support their claim to be the new caliphate. The caliph is the successor of Muhammad as the political, military, and spiritual leader of the Muslims. There was always a caliph, or most of the time there was a caliph in the Islamic world up until 1924. And all the jihad groups since 1924 have made it as a primary part of their goal to restore the caliphate. But the Islamic State has actually done it. And done it in a way that makes them attractive to hundreds upon hundreds of Muslims in the West. 1,000 from France, and 700 or 600 or 700 from Britain, and hundreds from Germany, and several hundred from the United States. We never saw this with Al-Qaeda. We never saw this with other jihad groups. There were a few people, a handful, that would go join them from the West. But this is a massive flow of people, and it does seem to indicate that the idea of the caliphate is quite attractive among Muslims. But as far as their understanding of Islam goes, they don't have any differences with all these other jihad groups. And the thing is that, of course, in the West, Muslim groups like the Council on American Islamic Relations, which has ties to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, they've denounced the Islamic State and said that it's not Islamic and so on, but they've not offered any explanation for that as to why on Islamic grounds this group is not Islamic. And above all, there's not a single mosque or Islamic school anywhere in the country that actually teaches against the understanding of Islam that the Islamic State represents, which is a very strange omission. If they really oppose jihad terror and they really oppose the Islamic State, why aren't they helping young Muslims turn away and turn down the appeal from the Islamic State? And I think that shows that their condemnations actually ring hollow.
Robert, we are pretty much out of time. I could talk to you all night. I feel like a sponge whenever I'm around you. One quick question, as quick as you can answer it. Let's say Islam is wiped out. It's a perfect world. Everything's wonderful. What will Robert Spencer do?
Oh, I'd go back to playing the sax.
In your shorts, I hope. Right? Everyone, please, please, please follow Robert Spencer on jihadwatch.org. Go to Amazon, Google his name, buy every book he's ever written, and read every word he writes. If you want the truth, this man does not hold back. He never has, he never will. God bless you, Robert. Hold up that bumper sticker. Show everyone what you're about.
I stand with the persecuted Christians of the Middle East, and that, of course, is the Nun, the Arabic letter Nun, that is the first letter of Nasara, which is the Quran's word for Christians. And the Islamic State painted the Nun on the houses of Christians in Mosul to mark them for extortion or extermination. And so we need to stand together in solidarity with all the victims of jihad.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Robert. God bless you.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you all for joining us tonight on the Glazov Gang. Jamie will be back, I hope, soon. And we'll see you next time.